Hey everybody! In this video, we're going to look at one of the key features behind SQL Server Machine Learning Services, native scoring. SQL Server Machine Learning Services allows you to integrate your R, Python, and even Java code with SQL Server data, enabling data science and machine learning scenarios. What we're going to do here is show a demonstration of machine learning services with native scoring. And I figured, while I'm doing that, why not show you Linux with containers? Throw in a bit of PolyBase too, just because that's how I roll. So let's get on with the demo. If you'd like to play along with this demo, go grab it from this GitHub repo. What I have in here is a README file that takes us step-by-step through the process. One of the first steps is to grab some Docker examples from Microsoft. So I have a link to their repos, like MS SQL Docker. You'll grab the Docker file and supervisor-d configuration file. So if we check out the Docker file, one thing that I do want to point out for this file, as well as the PolyBase one I have linked, is you need to change preview to 2019. If you don't do that, you will have problems running the containers. So I took those files, and now I'm going to go to a command prompt and hop into the source code folder where I put them. Inside here, I have a MSSQL-ML services folder. Then in that folder, what I'm going to do is run docker build. I'm going to tag the contents of this folder as MSSQL-ML services. Now this will take a while, and I'm just going to zoom through all of this because frankly, you really don't want to see all of the updates. Here I am running at about 60x speed. It took several minutes to update everything, but eventually it did finish. So here we go. It's completed. Now I'm going to hop over to the PolyBase folder and I'll do the same thing. We'll build a new image. We're going to call it MSSQL-PolyBase, and this one went quite a bit faster because I already grabbed a lot of the updates that needed to happen for Ubuntu. We've built out our images, and now it's time to create a couple of containers storing our SQL servers. So I have the scripts right here ready for us. I'm going to take the first one, which will run ML services, and I'm going to have it running on port 51432 on my host machine. So that container is up and running right now, and I'll hop back over to the script and grab the other container script. So that's going to run PolyBase and will run on port 51433. As I kick that off, it takes just a moment for SQL Server to spin up as a container. Containers are such fun. So now that I've got that in place, we can go to the next step. And that next step is to run a script called create input table. So from this point on, I've got scripts pretty well labeled, and we're going to follow along. In Azure Data Studio, I'll connect to my localhost on port 51432. Going to machine learning services. I'll log in with that really bad password. Let's connect, and we'll kick off our first script. So the first thing I need to do is enable external scripts. That's going to allow me to run machine learning services. I'll SP configure that and then reconfigure, and bam, we have machine learning services running on Linux. Just to make sure that it's running, I'm going to kick off a test script that runs our code and just prints out hello test. And we can see the results, success. So with that in play, let's go to our actual demo. I'll create a database, native scoring test, and then inside there will be a table, some linear regression input data. So this table will contain a lot of rows, but I need to generate those rows. Fortunately for you, I have a script that runs in Python that I'm going to kick off. I'm using the Anaconda distribution of Python, but you could use something different. This script, by the way, takes several minutes to finish. So again, we're zooming through time really fast. Oh, looks like it's finished. So let's hop back to Azure Data Studio and give this a run, and we see 250,000 rows. If I look at this data, we have 3 input features that are all going to try to predict this label. So given some input features, what will the value of the label look like? It's generated data, but it's fun. So let's go over to the next script. In this script, we're going to create a table called dbo.model. Now this model table has on it a model var binary. This is where we're going to store the actual models in the database, in the table, I know, but still, just roll with me here. So we'll create the table, and as soon as I decide that I'm going to run this thing, it will get created. Next up, we're going to create a procedure generate linear model. So it outputs a trained model. That's going to be important for us in a moment. Scrolling down to see the whole procedure text, I have an input that is a SQL Server query looking where ID is less than 100K. We're going to execute an external script, and inside that external script block, what's important is this serialize with real-time scoring equals true. So this is how I get native scoring. I'm going to pass in the input of my SQL statement as input data, and I'm going to get out a parameterized model. Now that I've taken us through the context of the stored procedure, let's highlight the whole thing and I'm going to create it. This way we'll be able to execute the procedure against our data set. So I will create a trained model, and I'm just going to try this out first just to make sure that it works. This will run against 100,000 rows, generate a model. That does take a few seconds. So we saw that it took roughly 6 seconds to do. Now that I'm satisfied it will create something, we're going to insert that into the model table. So again, it takes about 6 seconds. That's 6 seconds of my life I'm not getting back, but at least we can continue on with the demo. The goal here is to fill up a linear regression load test table with the results of our test data set. I'm going to generate 4 million rows, all of which built off of cases where the ID is greater than 100K. That is data that our system hasn't seen yet in training. This is also going to take quite a bit of time, meaning that I am going through hyperspace. We are done. It took about 2 minutes to load the 4 million rows. I'm going to pull the linear model back out of that model table. And then we're going to insert into the linear regression load test table the results of our predictions. I predict using the predict function, which is built into SQL Server. I'll take in my linear model, my data set, the 4 million rows, and generate a label underscore pred for each one of those 4 million rows. As I highlight this query and run it, it too will take some amount of time. At roughly 60x or so, it took about 1 minute and 57 seconds to generate 4 million predictions. Even with the time it took to read and insert 4 million rows, that's still 34,000 predictions per second. If you want to know how accurate the predictions are, we can look at the root mean squared error. So this is a root mean squared error of about 15 versus an absolute value average of about 74. It's not that bad of a result. I can look at the top values of the linear regression load test table as well to get a feel for what these look like. You can see that there are some differences. Some of them are better predictions than others, but again, it's not an awful set of predictions. So I'm pretty happy with the results. And with that, we're going to go to the third demo, the bonus demo using PolyBase. So I'm going to connect to 51433. We'll connect again using that same bad password as before. Please don't have that be your password. Now, for this machine, I need to enable PolyBase. And it's as simple as that. I now have PolyBase enabled. I'm going to create the database and use it. And then I'll have to create a database master key so that I can work with database scoped credentials. Created that. Next up, creating the database scoped credential and connecting to my data source, which will be my SQL Server instance with ML services, but I have to use my host IP address. So let me change that. You'll have to change it to whatever your IP address is. And then we can highlight the whole thing and create my scoped credential and external data source. Took less than a second to run. Next up, I can create an external table querying the dbo.model table over in my native scoring test database. Just to make sure that this thing worked, I can query dbo.model, and that's going to pull over from the other Docker container my linear model and the var binary for it. What I'll do on PolyBase server is create some test data, and we're going to use this as my inputs and run a prediction off of that. So same predict function, but wait, I don't have machine learning services installed on here. Well, it turns out if you're using native scoring predictions, it doesn't matter. That's built into SQL Server regardless of whether you have machine learning services. So I can build the model on one machine, run it on another one. I hope you enjoyed the demo. Take care. See you again soon.